Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today I'm going to be talking about my review for the movie It. Alright, so major spoilers for the movie It in this content. Okay, so I saw It on opening night, and I would give it 4 out of 5 stars. I enjoyed the film. As a horror film, I thought it was genuinely scary and disturbing. I also think it's an important film because it's accomplished a few things that other films have not. I do want to put my cards on the table as far as this review. So I consider myself a serious movie fan, but I also am going to acknowledge that I am a lightweight when it comes to horror. So my favorite horror movie of all time is The Skeleton Key, which is an older film, and that's like my ideal kind of horror movie. So I'm not really into hack and slash films. And so, I really enjoyed Blair Witch, the original. I like the remake as well. But I just wanted to kind of put it out there that, I tried Saw. I saw the first Saw movie, but I'm not the guy who's going to see Saw 7. It's just not going to happen, right? Paranormal Activities. These are the kind of films I like, right? And I have a taste for horror films, but I also know that this is a serious genre, and that there are people who understand this genre at a deep, deep level. And so, I'm essentially, when it comes to movie fandom, I would say I am a lightweight on the horror section. But I add films to to what I've watched, and this is my take on it. Right. So, let's talk about the big obvious stuff. So one of the things that's interesting. This is Monday morning. It was released this weekend. From everything that everybody's talking about, this broke virtually every single record for a horror movie that there is. It did tremendously. Commercially, it was a success. That's interesting because this is a hard year for Hollywood. It's one of the worst in 25 years. They're learning some lessons this year, you know what I mean? Because I've had friends who are saying to me, I haven't seen a movie in months because there's just nothing to see, right? So it's really, really fascinating. So this was a big hit for Hollywood, and I really feel it's an interesting and important movie for the following reasons. One, I am a fan of Stephen King. He is a tremendous writer. So let's talk about art for a minute, and Stephen King as an artist. All right, so art is 100% subjective. It really, you cannot say objectively, oh, this is a great piece of art. But there are artists and there are works of art that are so good that they approach being objectively good. And I think Stephen King is that kind of writer. He's so good as a writer that he is almost objectively can be said to be a good writer. I think he's tremendous. I've read a lot of his books. I would say I've read more of his books than I haven't. Probably like 60% of the books he's written, I've read them. And I'm a big fan. He's very, very good at what he does, and It is arguably one of his best ever, right? So let's talk about It, right? So It vies, as far as one of the best books that Stephen King has ever written. It vies with The Stand for the best adaptation. What's really fascinating is I continue to grow in sympathy for Hollywood. I no longer believe what a lot of people believe. They're like, why are they so stupid? Why do they, make bad movies all the time? And so, here's a good example where, it was being made at the same time The Dark Tower was being made. Dark Tower is not something, it's not foundationally strong, right? That film, they're going to have an incredibly difficult time, if it may be impossible, to make a sequel to The Dark Tower because the source material, the first film in the series, is so weak. It, coming out of opening weekend, everybody's talking about the sequel. I want to see the sequel. I want to see the sequel. Who's going to be cast? Who's going to be cast? Who's going to be cast? Right. So I think that's really fascinating. That it was built at the same time. Stephen King was involved, to my knowledge, in both projects. One of them was, just not foundationally strong. One of them looks like it's going to serve as a strong foundation for a series, right? And that's really, really interesting. Or at minimum another film. So it was really very interesting. So one, it is a horror movie, right? And I just want to talk about that for a minute. I found this movie genuinely scary and genuinely disturbing. So one of the things is I saw it by myself, which I had to do because no one in my family was interested. The only person who was even remotely interested in seeing it with me was my son, Xavier. He's my oldest son, and he just graduated from college, which is great. Really excited to have him back home. And he's a huge Stephen King fan, and he is, and he didn't want to see it because he wants to read the book. And he didn't want the movie to spoil it for him. I'm like, yeah, I get that. That totally makes sense to me. So I understood why he didn't want to go see it with me. So I saw it by myself. And also, I am an evangelical Christian. There are evangelical Christians seeing this film, but they're all going into it with trepidation, right? So I saw it by myself, and I will tell you right now, I could not watch it all. I did a lot of covering my eyes and not watching, 5-10 seconds. So like there were just times where I didn't see what was coming. You know what I mean? And it was really, really scary film. And I think the other thing, I think one of the reasons why this movie is being accepted and is being has done as well as it does is it's a horror movie with teeth, no pun intended. I mean, this thing starts, you see Pennywise in the first 15 minutes, and he bites off like a 7-year-old's arm. Like, and that's like, okay, they're like, this is where you are now. Like, this is the film, right? Let's do this, right? And I was like, whoa, that's pretty hardcore. So that was really interesting to me, and and it was a very serious film. I mean, it was dark. It was very, very dark. I think one of the reasons why the movie was a success, why it works, and why I ranked it as 4 out of 5 movies, the source material. So one, I think everybody involved did a really awesome job of delivering Stephen King's vision. And I think the source material here is very strong. And so what you have is you have a guy, Stephen King, who's very dedicated to saying, this is the junior high years, right? And I want to tell you a horror story that involves junior high children. And that right there, that makes you a little more invested in that, actually these are people who are in transition. They're in transition from being children. They're not quite a child, but they're not quite an adult, right? And so we all remember that time. It's a difficult time for everybody. It's very human. And I think Stephen King captured that. And in this movie, you see kids that are doing a good job of projecting that, right? So the characters are likable. I also want to talk a little bit about Stranger Things. So I think that the success of Stranger Things really gave people an appetite to go see this movie. And so one of the things I think it did so well because everybody wanted to see Stranger Things season 2 right now. By the way, if I were Netflix, I would drop Stranger Things season 2 literally this weekend. That would be the cool. I would just be like, hey, here's Stranger Things 2. Hope you enjoy it. And so I think, so one, I think Stranger Things really primed the pump for this to succeed. And both of these films do the same thing. They capture life in the 80s in incredible detail. And not only incredible detail, but with emotional resonance. And I think that's really, really important. And these films just do a great, great job. And the other thing is, it really, and so one of the things, because this is a great piece of art, it made me, the movie It, 2017, I really feel is a great piece of art. This is a good, solid horror film. And it made me reflect on my life. And I think throughout this film, what you're looking at is you're looking at children who are being failed by parents. Parents who are just not doing everything they need to give these children what they need. Because the adults in this movie, the parents in this movie, are essentially fundamentally broken or they're deficient, right? And so these kids are on their own. So one of the things that really stood out to me, and I just want to say thank you right now to my good Lord. I watched this movie and I realized, holy cows, I was incredibly well blessed with my parents. So my parents, I really never wanted for anything. There was never a period in my life where I really needed something and my parents didn't deliver it. And I would go even further than that and say, not only did they supply everything I needed for my physical, emotional, and spiritual stability, they gave me far more than I needed and far more than I deserved. And when you look at it, you're going to be hard pressed to not say, my parents did a pretty good job, right? Because virtually every parent in the movie is failing their children fundamentally, right? It's just virtually fundamentally. So it was really very important and very interesting how this whole thing worked, right? And so it was really fascinating. It was a really solid film, and it really made me think a lot. And it was, and again, I think this thing worked because it was really able to bring what Stephen King brings to a novel, which is a genuine feel of this is life. This is what people are feeling. This is a real life experience rather than, with a sense of adventure and wonder and interestingness. Very, very fascinating. So I was definitely a fan of it for the 2017 It. I think it's a success. I think it does a good job at being a successful horror film. One other thing I thought was really interesting was I didn't really realize this. I read it many years ago, and it was interesting that in the book it sounded like it was 1950s, and then they updated it to 1980s for the second chapter, and here we're in the 1980s for the first chapter, and the chapter 2 will be in the modern day. I think that change really worked, and again, that's on the filmmaker. And all the actors in this. By the way, the standout actors in this, in my opinion, are Finn Wolfhard. He's really, really talented. And of course, you literally have the same people coming over from Stranger Things. So I really, this really has the bare bones and a lot of the same elements as Stranger Things. I am super hyped for Stranger Things Season 2. And then also Bill Skarsgård as Pennywise. I thought he did a really, really strong job at this. At doing a good job at delivering on this and delivering what it was. I do want to talk thinking about Pennywise the dancing clown. My youngest son, he asked about this film. And I was like, okay, let's talk about it. He's like, what is this? His question was, what is Pennywise? And that's a really interesting question. So here's what I think Pennywise is. I think Pennywise the dancing clown was a human being back in the 1800s. And all of the, when I watched the film and I put the puzzle pieces together, this is what I think Pennywise is. So Pennywise the dancing clown was a character made by a man in the 1800s. I think he was a real person, and he really was a clown, Pennywise the dancing clown. I think he did some horrible things when he was a human being, and based on his choices, I think he allowed a demon or more than one demon to enter into him, right? And so once Pennywise the dancing clown had that demon inside of him, he at that point he became a supernatural being, right? It's not just a human. It's not just a human that's possessed, right? Because Pennywise is hundreds of years old. I think he's at least 150 to 200 years old, right? And so how do you have a human being that is living that long? And so I think when the demon entered Pennywise was particularly evil, and then the demon that goes into him was particularly unusual, and at that point you have a persistent evil that is staying, right? And so I think what you're dealing with is you're dealing with a demon who has possessed a human, and then they've become essentially this, probably a creature that was given distinct powers by the person who leads hell, right? And so I think that's what Pennywise is. And I will also say, I don't think for one second that Stephen King knows what Pennywise is, but he's a smart writer, and he leaves it open, and he's leaving it open for interpretation. So I think that's what Pennywise is, And and again, you can look at the film and you can kind of piece things together, and I really like that. I like that there's enough room for conjecture, but there's also enough puzzle pieces to say, okay, I feel like I know what's happening here. One more thing about the film that I thought, so a lot of people have said a lot of things about the film. One thing that a lot of people were saying was, I'd heard some people saying, oh, this has too much of the monster and he wasn't dangerous. I was starting to feel that way, but I feel like they handled that problem in the film, right? So Pennywise is up against these kids all the time. He's grabbing kids, but the kids don't die. And I'm like, is he really that dangerous? Like, Pennywise is like manhandled every child here and only one of them is dead, right? So how dangerous is this dude, right? So one, I get from a dramatic perspective why you want to be able to show the monster pretty frequently, but the more you show him and the less people that die, the less dangerous he seems, right? But I feel like logically the film did explain this and had a really good explanation for it in the film. The reason why Pennywise was not able to just tear all of them apart the moment he got to them was, I think Billy was not afraid, and other people within Billy's group were just fundamentally not afraid. Right, and their lack of fear, which was emanating from Billy and kind of bolstering the rest of the group, was enough to protect them from Pennywise being able to have full power over them. And I thought that they explained that about 3/4 into the movie. And I thought that's a good, that's really solid. That's a good reason. And so I do think it holds up logically and it's cohesive. Really, really interesting film. That's my take on It 2017. 4 out of 5 star film, and by far, in my opinion, the best adaptation of a Stephen King novel, with one exception, and that's Apt Pupil. Extremely good film, 2017. It. Take care.